Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the White Coat Club. My name is Nicole, and I'm one of the counselors at Moon Prep. Today, we're going to be starting a two-part series. So this is going to be a segment for parents. The first part tonight is going to be how to best support our students who are currently seniors. So class of 2026. And then next episode is going to be how to best support our students who are currently juniors. So whichever, or, underclassmen. So whichever category you fall into, be sure to listen. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get more of our updates and admissions advice. So I have Muskan here today with me. We're going to kind of go through best things to do, how to support your students, like I said, for current seniors right now. So Muskan, take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, so like she mentioned, we're going to be talking about current seniors, and I think the thing on everyone's mind right now is when are we going to hear back from those colleges? It's definitely causing a lot of anxiety, which is, understandable. So, Nicole, do you have any suggestions for students who are currently waiting for college decisions?
Yeah. So, kind of best way to support your students is to constantly remind them to check their portals and emails throughout the week. It's a great skill to just continue to have. You're going to need this skill, throughout college, throughout, future careers. But really making sure they're being thorough as well. Unfortunately, I've had this happen where they delete an email or skim through an email and then they forget about it. I feel like as parents, we've all like had those texts that we think we respond to and then we forget about. So, really making sure and encouraging them to check their portals and emails throughout the week thoroughly. Remind your students, we need to keep in mind business hours. So if they're sending an email, at 6:00 p.m. on a Friday afternoon to an admissions counselor or a school counselor, they will probably not get a response till Monday. And that's expected. So if they're having a panic about it, Sunday morning, because they haven't got a response yet, just keep in mind business hours. That's when most adults are working at either the university or the high school. Now, for us at Moon Prep, we're pretty much here 24/7, but definitely keep in mind business hours and try to instill that in your students. And then also kids and students tend to kind of be all over the internet. So this is kind of twofold. A, don't believe everything you see on the internet, whether it's TikTok or Reddit or, other kind of forum blog style places, social media places. Definitely don't believe everything you see. We all know that. And then recognizing and realizing that some schools release acceptances or interview invites in batches. So if you see that someone got an interview or someone got accepted, that does not mean that you're completely out of the running. It just means, sometimes they just do it in spurts, in batches. They can't possibly get to everybody all at one time. So those are just kind of some tips to keeping them, like you said, keeping their spirits up while they're waiting. This waiting game is so hard.
Really good advice. I remember when I was applying to BSMDs, I was in I think the absolute last batch for one of my top choices, and I had just submitted to the Reddit gods, and I was like, okay, I'm out of the running, but last minute they pulled through and they offered me an interview. So you're really not out of the running until you get that rejection email. So it's a really good point that you made right there. Um, so another thing that we should probably discuss is the fact that students will ultimately have to face some denials. It's an unfortunate part of the process, but how can parents support their students who are, maybe getting a rejection from a college that they really wanted to attend?
Yeah. And, I think it lends a good point to even thinking back to when you're making your list. We're making a list that is going to be composed of different places, right? Reach schools, match schools, safety schools, kind of everywhere in between. Unfortunately, rejections are expected. So keep your head up. We kind of planned for this. We know that this could happen. Unfortunately, if it's like your top school, it's going to hit a little bit harder than a school that you maybe weren't so excited about. But keep your head up. Process it. We're going to move on to the next option. The plan for us at Moon Prep is having a full list and having as many yeses as possible. So if we get that no, we're going to process it, move on to the very next option that we have. You're still going to have great options. You're still going to look at your list and decide, okay, who have I not heard from yet? Who is a yes? And then constantly, going through those categories and figuring out what is my next place that I'm probably going to lean toward. And then another really good point that I think students don't necessarily realize is sometimes they get rejected from a school that was more of a match. And it kind of goes into a bit of a spiral, understandably. If I'm getting rejected from the school that's a match school for me, or even like a lower tier school, there's no way that I'm going to get into some of my higher tier, more, reach schools. That's definitely not the case. So rejection from a lower tier does not mean you'll automatically get rejected from others. There's so many things that go into it: retention rates, yields. It kind of goes into the business side of things, but just take each denial at a time, take each acceptance at a time, process it, move forward on to the next thing. Definitely don't kind of dote on it for too long. I think some students kind of get in a groove where they kind of want to sit with it over and over again and want to think about what could they have done differently or what did they do wrong. And, at this point, there's nothing you can do about it. Accept it, on to the next thing. I think is really the best way to support them.
Yeah, that's all really good advice. I think, it's a tough time, but I think parents and loved ones are really crucial in making sure that students can keep their head up, like you said. I guess moving on to a little bit more positive news. So like Nicole said, the goal is to always have as many yeses as possible, but sometimes that can also pose a challenge because it can get hard for students to decide, once they know what their options are, where exactly to commit to. So do you have any suggestions for how parents can help students choose between all of their wonderful options?
Yeah, it's a great time to try to get some visits scheduled. A lot of times now, once you've been accepted, they want you to come there. They kind of, put on the bells and whistles when they have those accepted student days. They want you to make that deposit by May 1st. So even before May 1st. So this is a great time to go on visits. They're going to be so happy to help, to, welcome you to their school, tour you around, answer any questions you have. So it's a great time to start to get excited about the options that you do have, especially if you're bummed or a little bit upset over an option that did not work out. Then, once if you can tour everything, that's great. Obviously that's, sometimes pretty impossible, but get some tours, get excited about some of your good options that you're excited about. Then you have to choose. Now, the reason why we come up with a great list is we want to figure out, again, like I said, as many options as possible. So what now, based on the acceptances that you have, are you leaning toward? Is it a BSMD versus an Ivy League school? What would you choose between the two? A BSCO or a top pre-med school? If you have two of those options, which one are you leaning toward at this point? When I ask the students these questions when they're in 11th grade, we usually tend to add almost every category to the list, again, just so we have as many yeses. Now that you're getting those yeses in, how are we going to decide between that, great BSMD or the Ivy League, or a great, pre-med top program versus a DO that's, high up on your list and really great location for you? So having these kind of tough conversations with parents and really figuring out logistics and all these things. So I think visits help with that. I mentioned talking to parents, seek advice. Older students, if you have cousins or if you know someone that went there, other people from your town. Obviously, speaking to a Moon Prep counselor is fantastic. We have a lot of students that go to a lot of these schools. We keep in touch with them. We're able to kind of give you some of their feedback and their experiences from the school. I think really coming out to kind of a pros and cons list. So thinking about the academic considerations would be like a number one spot for that. Does it offer the major you want? Obviously, is there any major hospitals nearby? Pre-med advising, do they have a specific person or is it just general advising? Think about research opportunities. Sometimes, again, when we're making this list, it's things that we want, but it's not specific things that we are now picking between. So, all schools are going to have academic advisors. Now, looking into the specific differences between the two, if you're between, a few different choices, really looking into the fine details. Logistics is a huge one. Again, when we have these college list conversations in junior year, we don't families and students just say, I really just want BSMD. I really just want top schools. I'll worry about the logistics later. But now thinking about it, if, you know, you're a freshman and there's no cars on campus and you're hours from an airport, you know, this happens all the time when you're thinking, well, actually, how am I going to get there? And how is this going to work out? I think I've had a student who recently I was speaking to about Stony Brook, and kids say Stony Brook, they think New York, and they're thinking Long Island. Many people don't realize how big Long Island actually is. And they're like, yeah, I'm just gonna, you know, hop on the train from the airport to there, and I'll be there and it'll be quick. It is not a quick train ride. Yes, you can take the train. You will have to transfer. It's much more involved. And then they were saying, yeah, well, I'll just go into the city for some research opportunities. This is going to be hours of a commute to do that. It's not, you know, really looking at the map, really figuring things out. There is a hospital right on campus, which is great. But, you know, really thinking about logistics of where the things are. Okay, in New York, close to the city, but how close is close? There's, you know, if there's an airport nearby, how are you getting from the airport to there? Where are you putting your things? So obviously tuition is another huge one that comes in. At this point, you're going to be getting your financial aid packages, figuring out the actual cost that it will cost you. And then some other things that you could put on that pros and cons list, you know, campus culture, extracurriculars. Is there a huge size difference? Size is usually not a huge thing kids care too much about in the beginning. Again, just adding the schools to the list. What about the city that you're living in, that the city that's nearby? Is it safe? Is it, you know, not that safe? Where will you be doing your internships and your shadowing and things? So pros and cons, and, you know, really encouraging students to chat through these things. And I think, you know, from the parent's perspective, it's always going to be a collaborative conversation versus, you know, the tone of it being a little bit more leading.
Yeah, it's once again really helpful advice. I think I've seen in the past, you know, students have really elaborate pros and cons lists, and it makes me really happy to see them because there are a lot more considerations that go into picking a college than what might be considered when you're making a list, just like you said. So all really, really good advice. On that note, how can parents support their students in making that final decision?
Yeah. So again, continuous conversations with parents. I think I hear it all the time. I'm hearing it now from students. It kind of gets to be a little bit of a sticky time. It's a hard time, right? You're finally you're almost graduating. It's really exciting for the student. You're on your way. You're about to be, you know, out the door. You can taste it. And sometimes it's harder for parents, especially, you know, if it's the first time or maybe even if it's the last child in the family. But having these serious conversations is crucial, but having them in a way that's going to be suitable for everyone. So sometimes parents will schedule, like, listen, let's sit down at this time on this day to talk about these specific things. Giving, you know, not bombarding when they walk in the door. Giving action items. So, hey, on Sunday, you know, after dinner, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about this. In the meantime, can you, you know, get me this spreadsheet, or can you look over the spreadsheet that I made, or can you look over the notes that I'm going with? Setting expectations for these conversations. What is the goal? What are we going to talk about? Are we, you know, direct med or bust? Are we going with the lowest cost? Are we going with the best name, the best rank? Like, what is the goal for you? During all of my first meetings with my students, I want success for you, whatever that looks like for you. And then parents will ask, I want them to go to the best school. Well, what's the best school for you and your specific goals? So really sitting down to identify what that goal is and making sure you're on the same page with that goal. Being mindful of timelines. Now, the colleges are going to be emailing you nonstop right now, saying, you know, submit your deposit, submit your deposit, submit your deposit. Don't lose your spot. Don't lose your spot. We've discussed this in other episodes. May 1st is decision day. They cannot give up your spot until after decision day. But set realistic timelines. Set a time. We don't want to be talking about this, you know, April 29th. We don't want to still be going over the same points and, you know, harping on it. I've absolutely had it happen. It happens all the time. But setting expectations. So we have until May 1st, you know, maybe let's aim to have a final choice by, you know, April 15th or something. and then be thoughtful about when we're having these conversations and how long it's going to take to come to the right conclusion. Keeping an open dialogue. It's a really, like I said, it's like an exciting time for everybody. So making sure all points are heard and understood. And then, like we said, kind of, we have the expectations, we had identified the goals, but also setting a list of criteria. Is there something as the parent that this is an absolutely not or an absolute yes? And again, some people say, well, why didn't you think about that when you did the list? There's, as Ms. Scott said, there's different criteria we're looking at when creating the list in the beginning. And this is way more fine-tuned later on. And things change. Like, we're talking almost a year later. We're now making the decisions based off the list that we made a year ago. So sometimes you're even more educated. The parents are more educated, or the students are more educated on certain things that they hadn't thought about, or maybe they didn't think was important to them. I've sat with families junior year who say, anywhere, location is not enough, doesn't matter. Anywhere in the country doesn't matter. And now here we are a year later, and across the country is not really my preferred place for you to be. So things can change. Having a set list of criteria. Is price a key consideration? Is crime rate? Anything that's a definite yes, definite no, making sure we have a conversation about. And then always keeping emotions in check. Not the time to be having these explosive conversations. Really, this is a great time to, kind of foster developmental conversations, thoughtful conversations, intentional conversations, being super proud of them regardless of where they got in versus where they didn't get in. They worked really hard on these applications, worked really hard throughout their high school career, and, with their all extracurriculars and all of those things. So it's a really exciting time, but it's definitely a very, very stressful time, which we recognize. But keep emotions in check, reach out to us, if needed. And yeah, I think for making the final decision, I think that's really the key pieces.
Yeah, that's all really good advice once again. And like Nicole said, we're all here to support you and help you. Everyone's worked super hard. We're also super excited to see where all the seniors end up. And yeah, that kind of wraps up today's podcast. So tune in next time for more advice on how to support juniors and underclassmen. And we just want to wish the best of luck to our seniors who are making these decisions right now.